The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by Underdog Week 5 rankings by position. If you want a list of all of the rankings, hit the description. They're in the Mayo Media newsletter right now. Additionally, they're all on ProFootballNetwork.com at the same time. The updated injury report will be in that same newsletter link down in the description. So please, sub to the channel, smash like while you're here, and I apologize for last week's show. We were on the road covering the President's Cup, and we barely had the equipment set up in time to do the ranking show, so it was a minimal effort based on the technology that we had and the time constraints that we had. But we're back full time now, me breaking down everything for you. So let's get to the injury report for running backs to kick everything off. A few things popped up on Wednesday that we're going to have to monitor throughout the week, and we'll get to that in the rankings and where some of the other players may or may not rank. Bijan Robinson has a hamstring injury. He's probably going to play, but we did see a limited capacity from him on the ground, although through the air it was not a problem last week against the Chiefs. He should be fine for Thursday Night Football, albeit with maybe fewer touches on the ground than we're probably used to with a running back that we drafted so highly. So a bump up for Tyler Algier, a slight bump down for Bijan Robinson. Raheem Mostert may play this week. It's leaning that way, so I've put him in the rankings. Miami at New England this week. New England is a 1-point favorite, probably the only game all year they'll be favored in, but their run defense isn't so strong, but neither is Miami's. So maybe Mostert and A-Chain can finally get it going on the ground. Jonathan Taylor I have leaning out with this ankle sprain, which means Trey Sermon is into the rankings. Obviously, if that changes, I'll put Jonathan Taylor back in, but right now, it doesn't look like he is going to go. Austin Eckler should be back for Washington against Cleveland this week following his missed game a week ago with a concussion. Devin Singletary has a groin injury, so I'm going to monitor this. I've left him in the rankings as of right now. Tyrone Tracy Jr. would get a huge bump up, not like top 10 or anything like that, but probably just take the spot of where Singletary currently resides in the running back rankings this week. But that's a new one for Wednesday, and it's a groin injury. That's never great. That's a late game at Seattle in the afternoon set of games on Sunday as well. Jalen Warren is questionable. Joe Mixon should return for the Houston Texans. And then just some guys that you might want to stash or see if they're lingering on the waiver wire. Now, in 80 to 85% of leagues, these guys are unowned. But if you play in one of those weird leagues where they're not owned, Nick Chubb could return next week, week 7. He's returned to practice. Jonathan Brooks has not yet been activated off the PUP list, but he could come back week 7, 8, or 9, meaning a bit more runway for our guy Chuba Hubbard to really continue to pile up these fantasy points as long as Andy Dalton is playing quarterback. So for the rankings themselves, Jordan Mason comes in at number 1, Kyron, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones in the London game against the New York Jets. Their run defense still not very good. Derrick Henry, Kenneth Walker III, Chuba Hubbard, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Brian Robinson. Then you're into James Conner, Bijan Robinson, A-Chain, and I'd probably stop right there for tier 1 worth of guys. If you have 3 guys as a part of that collection, well, I hate to tell you your team's pretty good, at least loaded at running back, and you're probably going to make a few bench mistakes along the way because, I mean, obviously some guys are better than others. There's a tier 1 and tier 2, but these are kind of the guys that you know are going to touch the ball over and over, although we did not see that on Monday Night Football with A-Chain because Jalen Wright got himself very much into the mix, and then Jeff Wilson ended up leaving the game. They started getting blown out, and they couldn't run anything on offense. I would expect that they're a little bit better this time around against the Patriots, even with Mostert returning. The lead in that backfield is going to be A-Chain. With his explosiveness, you really can't leave him on the bench. At 14, I have ETN, Breece Hall at 15, Mixon at 16, Jerome Ford, Najee Harris, Trey Sermon, Javonte Williams. There's Devin Singletary at number 21. I probably wouldn't have Tracy this high. I'd probably have him just behind Chase Brown at 25. So 20 is Javonte, Singletary, Rashad White, Zach Moss, Justice Hill, and Chase Brown. That's where I feel comfortable with guys that you can start, which is good because we're well past number 24 in the rankings, which means we're talking about flex plays, running back threes at this point. With Sermon, listen, he's not a great talent, but we've seen him have a few explosive rushes so far this season in the absence of Jonathan Taylor. Right now, it does seem like Anthony Richardson, although he's not practicing on Wednesday, I do have him in the rankings. I think that he's going to play. I think that benefits Trey Sermon in this circumstance. If Joe Flacco plays, it'd probably bump him down a few more notches, and we'll get a few more practice reports from Shane Steichen to see how that rotation is going to work. But right now, it would appear that if Jonathan Taylor is going to be out, that Trey Sermon probably gets locked in for 55 to 75% of the running back touches in the Colts backfield in a very plus matchup against the Jags. Now, going back up a little bit where I had that kind of pause, ETN, I don't know what's going on with him. They used him in garbage time a bunch 2 weeks ago that really saved his fantasy day. He was just standing on the sidelines watching Tank Bigsby run a week ago, and then he got himself back involved. It's still a fantastic matchup against Indianapolis, one of the worst rush defenses in football. And based on everything that we've seen from the Jags offense so far, they probably want to keep the ball out of the air as much as possible. So you kind of have to roll with him at this point. Hopefully he gets all those goal line touches and saves his day. Breece Hall at number 15 is sitting there as well. And listen, obviously I'm not going to put all stock into what he did last week when he basically didn't do anything in the rain against Denver. Denver, one of the more underrated defenses, especially run defense. I mean, overall, just pass and run defense. They're very, very good. Against the Vikings could be an easier matchup, but Braylon Allen continues to work himself in, especially when it's two running back sets inside the red zone that maybe you could steal a few touchdowns along the way. I do expect him to bounce back, but I don't think he's locked, ready to go as like the number one-ish running back on that tier right now, just because of volume. Maybe that all changes. Maybe in London we see back to the 80-20 split for Breece Hall, but I have a little bit of caution. Obviously, he's still a start, but that's where I'm at. And with Mixon at 16 against the Bills, he'd probably be inside the top 8 at running backs if I was 100% sure that this injury wasn't going to nag him at all. I actually had to manually adjust him down in my projections in terms of share of carries in the backfield because there's a chance Dameon Pierce returns for this game. Probably not, but maybe he returns. But Cam Akers been filling in, well, valiantly is probably not the right word with this, but he's out there and he's running the ball. And then Dare is still going to be the receiving back. He's still going to get the 2-minute drill stuff. So much of Mixon's perceived fantasy value right now comes from what happened against week 1 against the Colts. And he's just not going to have over 30 carries in a game. And even with the over 30 carries, he wasn't uber efficient in those games, in that game either. And since we've seen him, obviously he's gotten hurt. He's still the primary back in the Texans backfield, a supercharged offense, even though the points haven't necessarily translated. The yardage is most certainly there, but the risk of re-aggravation is on the table, them easing him back into play, that he doesn't get his full complement of touches. That's what's keeping him down a little bit. Obviously still a play in almost every single format. Again, unless you have one of those super teams where you come up, it's like, oh, do I have the ability to start James Cook, Chuba Hubbard, Brian Robinson, and Derrick Henry? I can only have 2. It's like, no one's really worried about your team, pal. Like, you have 4 excellent options. You can start whatever 2 that you want, that you feel better about. And when you start getting into those situations, maybe you make a trade. Because I'd like to see the rest of your team and see how that wide receiving core is going for you right now. Because you have a lot of leverage at this point in time. With Jonathan Brooks returning at an unknown date, maybe, like I said, week 7, 8, or 9, Hubbard's lifespan gets stretched out a little bit more as being the primary back in this Panthers backfield. And he's been great since Dalton's taken over. This offense has not only been, well, great's probably stretching it, but compared to what it was, it's, the 2007 Patriots. But we know where the ball is going, and that is so helpful for fantasy purposes. In the air, it's going to Deontay Johnson. On the ground, primarily, it's going to Chuba Hubbard. The goal line touches are going to Chuba Hubbard. And then you have Xavier Leggett into the mix now that Thielen is out, and at the tight end, it doesn't really matter. But when you have a concentrated offense like that, it is fantastic for fantasy purposes because we can actually accurately predict where the ball is going to go. Whether they come down with it, they're good throws. This we do not know. That's a difficult one to figure out. And against the Bears, it's a tougher matchup, especially through the air. But this is the type of offense that we like to see in terms of predictability for offense. So if you use code Mayo at underdog right now, you'll get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. If you do it before Thursday Night Football, new depositors and new customers will get a free pick for Thursday Night Football with Kirk Cousins, half a yard over under. So I would take the over on that one. I may not be from the future, but I can almost guarantee you that one is going to be a winner if you use code Mayo at underdog right now. But Deontay Johnson's one, just even if it's 6.5 receptions, 5.5 receptions, 75 yards, just go over. Touches and carries for Chuba Hubbard, unless they fall way behind, which is unlikely against the Bears and their anemic offense, that if it's set at 15.5 rushing attempts, just go over and hope he doesn't get hurt. It's tough to play these things when you think that a really healthy guy is going to get hurt, so just go over. And you have a very easy plan ahead of you for the Carolina Panthers offense. So here are some other things that I'm keeping on my radar right now. Obviously, Bucky White is eating into what Rachaad White is doing. Rachaad White is still the lead right now. So Rachaad White's at 22. Bucky Irving is down at 31. The other big news that came out of Wednesday, and we'll see how far they go with this, I've already mentioned the two Dolphins running backs, Achane and Mostert, who I do like better than Stevenson and Gibson, but there could be a chance, Gerard Mayo said, of Antonio Gibson starting over Ramondre Stevenson. I don't know if that makes that big of a difference. Stevenson's fumbled in 3 straight games, so they might show him the pine for a little bit. I'd say at best it's probably 50-50, even if Gibson starts. I still like Ramondre better because he's better. And they're actually favored in this game, and you can run on the Dolphins. We got a little bit maybe too excited about Ramondre and what he could potentially do in week 1 against the Bengals, but the Bengals have like a historically inept offense right now that everyone can kind of run against them. And maybe with a lead in this game, everything plans out to what the spread has been set at, that maybe you end up seeing Ramondre with 15 touches in this game, Gibson with 13 touches in this game, and we'll see who ends up drawing a goal line touch if they can manage to get down that far. I would still put my faith in Stevenson. That's why he's number 28. But Gibson at 30 means he's still a play in this spot. Now, if you wanted to go with Bucky Irving, because he ended up with the 2 goal line touches a week ago, it just looks like he's shot out of a cannon every time he touches the ball, wouldn't hate on you for that. Emmanuel Wilson in this game against the Rams defense, very poor as well. Bottom 5 in the league right now. And if they're still trying to ease Jordan Love back in, but this was more of a Malik Willis thing where we saw a ton of Emmanuel Wilson. They'll switch back to Josh Jacobs primarily, and it would just be maybe here or there that Wilson gets mixed in if Jacobs gets. Maybe there'll be a few design packages for Emmanuel Wilson, but it's really hard to project him for the valuable touches in this Packers game. Roschon Johnson, I mean, I have DeAndre Swift at number 26. He broke the big one last week. It does seem like they want to swing back towards Roschon Johnson a little bit. He got the goal line touch and obviously scored the touchdown a week ago against the Rams. It's just hard to put too much faith into this offense right now from an upside perspective. Again, if you want to see the full list and the updated list every single day, just hit the link in the description or subscribe to the free Mayo Media newsletter on Substack, and you can get that right away. The only other one is Austin Eckler. I said he's coming back with the concussion. Probably. We saw McNichols end up scoring 2 touchdowns once things got out of hand for Washington a week ago. I like Eckler enough, but it feels like he's always the one. Like, he's third in the pecking order on the ground to score touchdowns. You could say it's 1A and 1B with Brian Robinson and Jaden Daniels, and then it's Eckler. When you have to do your scoring from distance, obviously, if you do it, you're going to have a really good fantasy game. Just the degree of difficulty for that is so much higher that it's hard to put too much faith into a guy who sees so few touches from inside the 5-yard line. The catches should be there, but again, they may be easing him back in off his concussion, and you know how that goes from time to time. Zach Moss and Chase Brown are very close in the rankings right now, number 23 and number 25. Chase Brown really did eat into a lot of the workload of Zach Moss. Moss still out-touched him. He still out-snapped him, and they split the red zone touches last week. Obviously, Chase Brown made the most of his over Zach Moss, but I'm still going to take the guy that gets the most touches with all things being equal in terms of the valuable touches, and that's a slight hair and a slight nod to Zach Moss at the moment. The only other guys I would really think about, you got like Kareem Hunt at 27. I have no idea what he's going to do. He's just a Chiefs running back. It seems like Carson Steele may be a thing of the past after he put it on the ground last week. Then they just turned to Kareem Hunt as their primary ball handler on the ground. They're big favorites against New Orleans. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's if the game is going to play itself out that way with Rashee Rice on the sidelines, Hollywood Brown on the sidelines, Travis Kelce looking like he's lost half his athleticism at this point. It's Xavier Worthy with speed, so they're going to try to run the ball as much as possible this week. And that will probably do it for the running backs right now. And let's jump over to the wide receivers. For almost about 2 decades, the irons were really the only good part of my golf game, unless you include 300-yard drives, which meant hitting it about 150 yards straight and 150 yards with slice into the woods to the right. So I finally went and got lessons, straightened out my swing, and all of a sudden I could drive the ball pretty decently, pretty straight. And then my irons just kind of went wayward with the new compression that I was getting onto the ball. So it was time for me to make a change with my irons. So when I heard about the new PXG Black Ops irons and how they can dramatically improve my game, I had to give them a try. Booked a fitting with the PXG location, brought in my current irons, and took the PXG challenge. The staff was amazing. We worked on my ball flight through TrackMan in order to find the perfect irons and the perfect length and the perfect loft for what my game demands these days. And the new Black Ops irons are incredibly easy to hit, they maximize performance, and they're fun. Oh, and they're only $149.99 a stick. That is a great price for a great golf iron. So take the PXG Irons Challenge. It's a ton of fun, and if PXG's new Black Ops irons don't outperform your current irons by delivering either more distance or tighter dispersion, that means better accuracy, during your fitting, you'll get a $250 MasterCards reward card. Hurry, this offer ends October 7th. Book your fitting today at pxg.com. That's pxg.com. Wide receiver injuries to watch. Brendan Cooks was a notable one that popped up after Thursday Night Football. We thought everything was fine. He just had a bad game. Turns out he may or may not had a torn meniscus in his knee, and he got it operated on, and then it got an infection. So he is not playing this week. So a bump up for Jalen Tolbert, albeit against the Steelers in a tougher matchup. But this could cost him 1 week, it could cost him 4 weeks, depending on how the healing goes with that infection to see if it goes away. So that kind of came out of the blue. Jaden McMillan is going to be out with a hamstring injury on Thursday Night Football. Trey Palmer is probably not going to come back from his concussion, so they've signed Sterling Shepard to the active roster for Thursday Night Football, the Tampa Bay Bucks, and Mike Evans is, on the injury report. He'll play through whatever it is, but if you see him go down and limp off the field, don't be super stunned, but he'll probably end up coming back anyways, because that's what Mike Evans tends to do over and over and over again. Christian Watson's expected to be out for multiple weeks. The pecking order now goes Reed, Wicks, and Romeo Doubs. Then it's everyone else. You probably don't want to play the fourth and fifth receivers of the Packers. Tucker Kraft does get a little bit of a boost as the number one tight end in the Packers offense right now, and at a position where it's been pretty difficult to mine fantasy points, Tucker Kraft is probably widely available on your waiver wire if you need it. Rashee Rice is going to be out extended time. It doesn't appear as if he's torn his ACL, but that doesn't mean he's not going to miss time. He's going to be out for a while. Justin Watson I have as the number 2 ranked receiver after Xavier Worthy in the Chiefs offense right now. Devontae Adams, I have him as leaning out right now because of his either hamstring injury or trade demands that there's really no point of running a injured Devontae Adams out there and killing his trade value if the number one thing you're trying to do is trade for him. It is a pretty tough matchup against Patrick Surtain, but we'll see who draws that assignment. Because we've seen Trey Tucker move all around the formation. Jacoby Myers sometimes plays on the outside. Sometimes he goes onto the inside. So it's going to be tough to peg down who Surtain can probably take out in that game. And that's been a real thing so far this year between... it's him. J.C. Horn's done a pretty good job on Carolina, but Surtain, I'd say, has been the number one lockdown avoid corner so far this season. Obviously, Sauce is still on that list, but the Jets' defense just hasn't been as good as maybe we thought. It's not like I'm going to affect Justin Jefferson's ranking because Sauce might be lined up on him. Jefferson always overcomes. The great receivers, you always overcome in that. But the next level down, even tier 2, tier 3, when you draw one of these cornerbacks who might shut you down. Christian Gonzalez is another one, although you can get away from him pretty easily. He doesn't shadow in that circumstance. We saw that with DK in week 2, where when he was on Christian Gonzalez, he couldn't do anything, hence why JSN had such a big game against the Patriots. Metcalf gets off of Gonzalez for 3 plays, and boom, 70-yard touchdown for DK. Malik Neighbors is questionable. He did not practice on Wednesday with a concussion, but where it's been 10 days in between games, I would expect to see him back. If he's not, it is not good news for that Giants offense. Tank Dell I have is coming back. Trey Palmer likely out as mentioned for Thursday Night Football. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are both on bye weeks right now after missing week 4. I would expect both to return in week number 5. In terms of the rankings, Nico Collins comes in at number 1. Nico, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, if he plays, and I expect him to play. CD, even against Pittsburgh. Justin Jefferson, DK, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, Marvin Harrison, George Pickens, Debo, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Jaden Reed, Steph Diggs in another revenge game, this time against the Bills in their lack of coverage over the middle of the field. Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Khalil Shakir, looks like he'll be good. Rashid Shaheed, it's a tongue twister for you right there. T. Higgins, Wendell Robinson, Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, Garrett Wilson. So let's just call it right here. Let's call it at Wendell, because Wendell continues to see, he's like top 5 in the league in end zone targets right now, which is crazy to think about, that it's neighbors all the way down to the goal line. Then it's little pesky Wendell Robinson who is getting these looks. Now, if he came down with more of those in the end zone, then he'd be infinitely more valuable. But against the Seahawks team that's starting to really vibe on offense, that there could be a lot of catch-up play in this game, and we even saw it against Dallas. It's all Wendell. It's another one like that Panthers offense that I talked about, where you know where the ball is going. If Neighbors is playing, he's going to have like a 30 to 40% target share. Wendell's going to have like a 20 to 30% target share, and then everyone else just doesn't really do anything. Singletary does some stuff out of the backfield. Daniel Jones runs sometimes, but at least you know where the ball is going, hence making it so valuable with some of these guys. I never thought that Wendell would have this sort of value, and maybe he fizzles out. It's an early season type thing, but I really like him here. And yes, I would start him over Garrett Wilson. I would start him over Drake London. I worry about that Jets offense against the Vikings. Maybe I'm completely out of my element here, but although Aaron Rodgers is going to play with this knee injury, he doesn't look right. Like, there's still zip on his throws, but they're wildly inaccurate. And he just hates throwing to... The only guy he likes throwing to is Alan Lazard, who I have ranked at what? Where is Alan Lazard here? Alan Lazard, number 31. You could probably play that guy. But we just saw how, maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was the fact that the Broncos are a top 5 blitzing team in football right now. And just to throw him off his game, they're coming from everywhere. And Rodgers does not want to get hit. He is panic throwing. Now, Surtain did lock down Garrett Wilson last week. That happened. That was one of these things that we looked at and was like, oh, it's kind of obvious. And they had to work so hard to get him a touchdown on Christian Gonzalez in the Thursday night football game before that. It was kind of like into garbage time. It's like, all right, let's get Garrett one right now. He still has the talent to be way better than this, but with Minnesota and Brian Flores sending the house at Rodgers the entire time, it's going to be a lot of quick screens over the middle. He's even been complaining. Maybe the squeaky wheel narrative works for him and he goes way up, but it's in that weird London grass, a blitz coming at him. Rodgers doesn't want to get hit. He's been a little bit inaccurate from what we remember, and the route tree for Garrett Wilson has not expanded whatsoever. The more dynamic routes are being run by Alan Lazard and Mike Williams at this point. Mike Williams is starting to play a little bit more and more right now. So I'm worried about Garrett Wilson. Fortunately, he has the talent to overcome. Brian Thomas is just, his first read percentage is going super high from Trevor Lawrence, and this is a game against the Colts where they should be able to score points. You hope. But again, the concentration of that offense, it's Thomas and Kirk. Sometimes that guy who gives himself the stranger, he sits on his hand the entire time, and maybe he comes down with a touchdown or two. Maybe Evan Ingram comes back this week. We don't know. If Ingram comes back, Thomas and Kirk will both drop down into this like 30 range with Tutu Atwell, Jacoby Myers, Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy. Worthy could end up being a top 10 receiver for the rest of the year. It just does not seem like the Chiefs want to unleash him as a primary target. He's a bit of a gimmick play, and he's a rookie. Maybe his role expands now they put more into the playbook with Rice out, and they have to lean on him a little bit more. But it seems like it's going to be a lot of wheel routes, a lot of deep shots, or stuff around the line of scrimmage to get him in space and make guys miss. That's what happens when you have so much speed. But in terms of overall like running routes as a receiver, it kind of seems like Justin Watson and Travis Kelce are going to soak up most of that. And let's be fair, New Orleans has a top 5 defense so far. It's not an easy matchup by any stretch of the imagination. So when you look at Worthy, you think the upside is there, most definitely, but you kind of have to temper expectations. You call him a high-end number 3, not a solid number 2, depending on the team that you drafted. Drake London's been terrible, but so have a lot of players right now. So he and Garrett Wilson are kind of in the same mix. They're the lowest end of 2s, highest end of 3s, because they do still possess that upside. But it really, if you wanted to roll Worthy out over both of them, completely get it. Jacoby Myers, you got the feeling this week that he's not going to be on Surtain. Devontae Adams isn't playing, and you don't like Trey Tucker. We've seen Jacoby Myers be very effective. And when you have someone as accurate as Minshew running these shorter A-dot routes, which Jacoby Myers does, and the blitz that I just mentioned from Denver coming at you, then you're going to have to get the ball out pretty quickly. So I'd expect a lot of work just over the middle, a few slants, probably some jet sweeps with Trey Tucker, some quick hitches to Trey Tucker, but Myers is probably going to be the one who leads the Raiders in targets in what's not expected to be a high-scoring game, but it is a division game, and as a possession receiver, he's been very good. These are half-point PPR rankings. I'd actually bump him up a little bit in full-point PPR rankings. Cortland Sutton at number 30. I mean, he had more receiving yards than Bo Nix had passing yards at one point, which is kind of hilarious, but he's the dude in the Broncos offense that I wouldn't say rely on. He's sort of in that like Jerry Jeudy zone in a weird way where you see all the targets and maybe sometimes the production comes along with it. I have more faith that number 1 in the Broncos offense is going to be better than number 2 in the Cleveland offense right now, but it's a situation where if he leaves you with a goose egg on 11 targets, you're going to be like, how the hell did that happen? Then you watch Bo Nix throw, and it's like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So temper expectations there. So just overall, again, Garrett Wilson at 24, Drake London at 25, Zay Flowers at 26, Worthy, Jacoby Myers, Tutu Atwell is number 28. I said it last week on this show. I'll say it again. I like him the best of the Rams receivers as long as Kupp and Nakua are out. He's going to have these duds, but he's in that Shaheed zone. And there's a lot of receivers like this where their ADOT is just so high. Like even last week, 4 for over 80 yards. And when you're averaging right around or over 20 yards per catch, you can build up fantasy points in bunches, and you don't need a huge volume and target share to accomplish that. There are certain guys like that. Like Shaheed is the ultimate example because he catches a 50-yard touchdown every third week or so. And he's still getting his targets inside the end zone. Just 2 weeks in a row, he hasn't been able to pull it through. But they did use Shaheed a lot underneath a lot more, so he was able to retain his value through receptions and yards after the catch last week. Tutu Atwell, probably going to see a similar thing this time around. And we did see Sam Darnold light up the Packers defense in the first half last week. It got a little bit better in the second half, but playing from behind the entire time, you could see Tutu Atwell with like 8 targets. And that could be like 5 for 110 and a touchdown. Like that's a good wide receiver 3 that you could have on your team right now. Still widely available in a lot of leagues too. Lazard at 31, JSN at 32, Michael Pittman, Ayuk, who's just been pretty terrible, honestly, at 34. Dontavian Wicks is at number 35. He is second of the Green Bay receivers against the Rams. Again, about that porous defense. Now we got the problems. Yes, I have Dontavian Wicks over Tyreek Hill this week. Tyreek's going to make us look foolish one of these weeks when he turns 2 bubble screens into 90-yard touchdowns from Tyler Huntley, but I just don't know how you can have any confidence in playing him right now. This offense looks broken. It looks bad. And even though the Patriots' offense or defense hasn't been excellent by any stretch of the imagination, maybe that's what it was. Maybe in that first game, Tennessee's defense has been a top 10 defense so far. Maybe that's what shut them down. But I just see what the Patriots want to do on offense, what the Dolphins want to do on offense. Probably a low-scoring game, probably a lot of short passing, which gets the clock moving, lengthening these drives, shortening the game and the amount of plays that end up going through, and then just a lot of running on the ground, which accomplishes the same thing. And you can run on both these defenses that if he ends up with 6 targets again, yeah, he might break 2 for 200 yards, but it could be 4 for 16 and nothing at the same time. Like his standard deviation right now is all over the map. Like you have no idea where it's going to go. And it really doesn't feel like that high end of the bell curve is anywhere to be found right now. If he got to 100 yards, it would frankly be kind of shocking right now, and he'd probably have to do it all himself. Like I said, I'm willing to have egg on my face with Tyreek Hill about this because he has such dynamic speed. He's also dealing with a thumb injury as well, so maybe there's another part of that. When you saw him try to go for that fumble, aka he didn't, pulled a Cam Newton in the Super Bowl when he saw the ball on the ground, that it kind of seems like he's checked out at the same time too. A lot of these Dolphins seem like they're checked out. It was one game, maybe they rebound, and all of a sudden they look fine with Huntley under center, but until I see it, can't believe it. Other than that, Lockett at 37, Jordan Addison made his return very effectively too at number 38. Probably not going to catch 2 touchdowns a week. Josh Downs at 39, Trey Tucker at 40, Juwan Jennings at 41, DJ Moore, Xavier Legette, Darnell Mooney on Thursday Night Football. There's Jerry Jeudy at number 45. Washington's defense is really bad, and you can throw all over them. We didn't get the quite full complement from Arizona last week, and maybe Deshaun's not the right guy to take advantage of that, but if they fall behind, Judy's going to see in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 targets, behind Amari Cooper, but well ahead of Elijah Moore. Maybe Jerome Ford sneaks in for 5 to 7 as well, but Judy can still make it happen through the air with the volume that he's getting right now. He just needs Watson to hit him in stride a few times and did it with Amari Cooper. He either needs to catch the ball or not have a penalty called when he scores a 70-yard touchdown. All of a sudden, we feel a lot better about their fantasy prospects. But this is the defense that you want to be going around. Romeo Doubs at 46. Romadunze at number 47. With Brendan Cooks out, I have Jalen Tolbert at number 48 in the rankings. Ray McLeod at number 49, who's running an astonishing amount of routes for the Falcons. And these underneath guys have been beaten up. Not that Tampa's really been beaten up all that often this year, but these are the sort of quick route, fast twitch muscle guys that can get to the outside and burn, that really do, at least historically, have given Todd Bowles' defenses a lot of problems, especially because, like Denver and like Minnesota, Tampa Bay is blitzing the hell out of everyone right now. If they come in from the right side of Atlanta's line, Kirk is going to have to get that ball out so fast because that is not holding up whatsoever, that you start to think about the low A-dot guys. You're either going to have Mooney in the seams, you have the crossing routes. I mean, Pitts is like my speed at this point. He's not getting open at all. London's going to run the ins and outs and the crossing patterns, where it could be a situation where they hit him in stride and he can go after it, or they're just going to do these little dump offs, much like they did with Cordero Patterson a year ago, and Pittsburgh's been doing with him, just to Ray McLeod and just get him out into space, and hopefully he can make it happen. Low floor, but very high upside for guys down in this range. After that, you're still dealing with Keenan Allen, who's clearly still hurt, Jalen Waddle, Jordan Whittington, Justin Watson. You could put Watson higher if you wanted to, but I still don't know what that pecking order is going to be. Is it going to be Juju? Is it going to be Sky Moore? Are they going to sign some random dude and throw to him? I don't know. Are they going to run 35 times? It's always a mystery with what happens once you start getting into the third and fourth and fifth receiver of the Chiefs. One of them is very alive for a huge game. Which one? Always the question. I would put my money on Justin Watson as the best behind Xavier Worthy. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Gabe Davis dealing with a bit of an injury, well behind. Even though he's playing the snaps and running the routes, Lawrence is just looking for Brian Thomas first, and then Chris Kirk, or they're handing the ball off to Bigsby or Etienne, and not Gabe Davis right now. Super Demario Douglas, Rashad Bateman, Mike Williams, and Andre Yoshevesh. Nailers down there, Noah Brown, Darius Slayton. Alec Pierce is at number 61 right now. If it ends up being Richardson, that's probably better for Alec Pierce, although we did see Michael Pittman start to get more involved downfield last week against the Steelers. I don't know if that was scheme dependent, matchup dependent, but basically everything that you wanted from Pierce, all those targets just were funneled to Michael Pittman, or when Flacco came to the game, they were funneled to Josh Downs underneath. So this one will really depend on who plays quarterback. I have Richardson in right now, but that's still a tentative ranking, and I need to do it with the context of Thursday Night Football being played probably before we know much of this information. If I can guarantee that Richardson is the starter, then Pierce is going to go up in these rankings and Downs is going to go down, and so is Pittman. If it's Flacco, it's going to be Pierce down farther than this, and Downs probably up a little bit more, with Michael Pittman staying right around the same spot. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Tight end injuries. Evan Ingram is questionable to play. We haven't seen him since, I guess, week 1. Because we saw him warming up in week 2 and then he hurt himself. And then we didn't see him again. We haven't seen him since. Trey McBride is back to practicing, so he is probably going to play. David Njoku's leaning in at the moment, but I've still been hesitant to rank him because, again, Thursday Night Football coming around, I'd want to be sure about that. With Trey McBride, where he is practicing, I expect him to return. Michael Mayer, no idea yet. It's personal reasons he's away from the Raiders right now. And we don't have any word on Taysom Hill at the moment either, but getting into the tight end rankings for the week, try to make this easy on everyone and start your guys. Now that Rice is out, it seems like Kelsey is back up top. So he's number 1, Kittle's number 2, Jake Ferguson, Trey McBride. Those are like the 4 guys you can kind of trust at the moment because everyone else sucks at tight end. If you have a hunch that someone's going to score a touchdown, I don't care what their name is. Start that guy. They'll be a top 5 tight end for the week, especially with Goddard on bye week right now. Brock Bowers is number 5, but we have even seen without maybe he needed Devontae Adams around to get primary coverage away from him. Maybe that's who Surtain ends up on, is Brock Bowers, because he is their best receiver. He has the most dynamic talent, that size and speed that take him out of the game. What can the Raiders offense do? I guess we'll find out, but if he's not going to be a target magnet without Adams around, it's not great for him. He's still number 5, despite the fact that he might not be great because tight end sucks. Cole Kmet at 6, Hunter Henry at 7, Tucker Kraft at 8, already mentioned. With the absence of Christian Watson, expect to see more routes, more targets for Tucker Kraft in a very soft matchup against the Rams. Dalton Kincaid, it's a very toss-up-y type game. We've seen him get more and more integrated the Thursday Night Football game against Miami and then against Baltimore. In both those games, we didn't see the first-team offense play in the fourth quarter because they were either up by too much or down by too much. That if they actually play a back-and-forth game with the Texans is great news for Dalton Kincaid, who should still be the number 3 fantasy option. I guess number 4 if you include Josh Allen as well. And number 2 in the passing game, you'd go James Cook, you go Khalil Shakir, and then you still hold out hope that Dalton Kincaid can get it done for you. Isaiah Likely, there's another one. Just, he had one good game, then nothing. Of course, it's the game that I bet him under on everything, and he had like 4,000 fantasy points. But hey, he's number 10. Colby Parkinson continues to work in this offense as a receiver for the Rams in catch-up spots. High volume, low upside, but good floor for number 11 in the tight end rankings. Ditto with Pat Freiermuth in this game against Dallas. Tyler Conklin, some weeks it's going to be 7 catches, other weeks it's going to be none. You never know with Aaron Rodgers and where he wants to pass it. He's number 13. Gesicki is 14. Dalton Schultz, Zach Ertz, Noah Fant, Kate Otten, and Kyle Pitts on Thursday Night Football. Brenton Strange is down at number 20. Mark Andrews at 21. Mark Andrews is in that Tyreek Hill zone right now where he's going to get you when you don't play him, but you're probably best off just not playing him and living with the one game where he goes off on your bench, and hopefully it doesn't murder your season. Because what can murder your season and your week would be playing Mark Andrews on a consistent basis if you've been doing that, because you're generating 0 points from your tight end spot right now. Kyle Pitts is the same way. He sucks. He caught a touchdown this year. That was great. He barely scored 15 points if he scored that. Like, he's not capitalizing on anything. And if you don't have that reception floor, that yardage floor, and you're not being utilized whatsoever in the red zone, it's going to be tough to score fantasy points. At least that's the way that I break things down. Now, if Evan Ingram returns for this game, I still worry about him, mainly because he's dealing with a hamstring injury. The risk of re-aggravation is still high. Hamstring in particular, soft tissue injuries in particular. When guys come back from a knee, as long as they're not a quarterback who need to plant on that knee, they're usually fine in those circumstances. However, with the hamstring, it's a little bit dicier. I would put Evan Ingram at number 8 in the rankings, in between Hunter Henry and Tucker Kraft, if that's the way that you were looking at it. Now, if Taysom Hill plays against the Chiefs, because I have him out of the rankings as well, I think he's like a must-start every single week because he's going to score rushing touchdowns, which none of these other guys can do. I would have him, even against the Chiefs, at number 6, in between Brock Bowers and Cole Kmet, should Taysom Hill go. And going down to the quarterback rankings right now, I have Richardson in. Aaron Rodgers is beat up a little bit, and Tyler Huntley is going to start for the Miami Dolphins against the Patriots once again. But yeah, I have Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Geno, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud going against each other. That's the top 5. Then I have Burrow, Purdy, Love against the Rams, Fields against the Cowboys, and then Kyler Murray. Outside of the first half of week 1 and then week 2 when he beat up on the Rams, because even Caleb Williams put up like 27 fantasy points against the Rams last week because their defense is really, really bad. Kyler really hasn't been that great. I think if you take out that one game, and you use the Bills game, you use last week's game against a really bad defense, which he wasn't able to light up, I think Kyler's 22nd in fantasy points per game, outside of the one gigantic result where he was the number 1 quarterback that week. That upside is always there, but I think the floor is a lot lower than people imagine. He's not necessarily a must-start guy every single week if you have other options. Like if Mahomes has been bad, he's still Mahomes going against the Saints. He's probably good for like 225 and 2 touchdowns. Which would put him right around number 11 in terms of QB. But his upside does seem a little bit more limited, especially with a lot of these receivers being out now as well. Anthony Richardson, if he plays, he always has that rushing upside. Ditto with Daniel Jones. a guy like attacked me on Twitter a few weeks ago whenever the Bills played the Dolphins on Thursday Night Football, and I had Daniel Jones ranked above Tua, and my explanation was like, Tua's not going to do you anything on the ground. Well, he did end up doing something on the ground. He gave himself a concussion on the ground and knocked himself out of the game. But the overall upside with Tua, like, you need 2 deep ones from Hill and a deep one from Waddle for him to do it. Pocket passers just do not have that much fantasy value unless they are putting up 3+ touchdowns a game. And with the Dolphins offense being how it was and struggling a little bit out of the gate, that seemed unlikely. Whereas Daniel Jones, even in the game against Dallas last week, like, there's a lot of times he can just manufacture 1 touchdown. But because of the yardage from, especially with Malik Neighbors right now, that he's able to generate and what he does on the ground, he's just a very steady fantasy option, especially when they're big dogs like they are against Seattle this week. Now, if Neighbors doesn't play, he gets put down like a dog at the pound. But if he does play, you're going to want to play Daniel Jones as a lower-end quarterback, one with a lot of upside because of the rushing that comes with it. Like, it's the reason that Dak and Kirk Cousins are at 14 and 15, and Andy Dalton's at 16. Maybe Baker could be higher, but Atlanta's D has been sneaky good so far this season. That Baker might generate a few on the ground, but I would expect this game to be a lot lower scoring, and he is without McMillan. He is without Trey Palmer. Kate Otten does nothing in this offense, and Evans is banged up. That maybe the overall complement of options for Baker as they started to get decimated in the second half against the Eagles last week in terms of injury may not be there. I like him as a more game manager situation against a good Atlanta defense. Still good, not great. Did it with Darnold against the Jets. Like, Darnold's been awesome. He's probably the MVP so far. This is a significantly tougher matchup in a weird on a weird field in London against the Jets D, out of your normal circadian rhythms and everything like that, where good potential upside every time that you have Jefferson, he's there, and he does contribute a little bit on the ground. He's sort of like advanced Tua in that way as a fantasy option, but not something that it's not someone I would want to turn to in better matchups. Yes, I would love to go that way. Caleb could be higher against the Panthers, but I just worry that he throws like 3 picks and then it's not like if he's not catching up the whole time or there's not another team pushing him, then I really don't know what to do with him. I would prefer Andy Dalton in the same game going back the other way. Finally, we got the defenses. Seahawks, Steelers, Bears, Broncos, and 49ers are the top 5 right now. I know Vegas is going to want to run the ball as much as possible. It should be bad for the Bears or the Broncos defense, but their offensive line is kind of in tatters right now. They blitz the hell out of everyone. And if they can just get up in this game, which is tough, although they love running the ball, and the Raiders' rush defense, especially with Max Crosby by being in or out or banged up, whatever he is, they're just not generating a ton of pressure. Bo Nix is going to run on the ground, and they're going to try to pound the ball with Javonte Williams. If they can just get up and force the Raiders to throw, it could be a bonanza of fantasy points for the Broncos defense right now. Obviously, the Niners against Kyler, that's a plus situation, even with all the injuries that the Niners have on offense right now. The Packers against, the Packers were able to do some, outside of the first half, they were able to do some decent damage in the second against the Vikings. And the Rams offense can look good at times, or they can look like they did against the Bears last week and they should have had more turnovers. They had a few overturned by phantom penalties that really should have went against them, but didn't. So that's where we're at right now with them. So I like the Packers on the road at SoFi against the Rams. The Vikings against the Jets. Again, blitz the hell out of Rodgers. Good things might happen. The Dolphins against New England. Atlanta against the Bucks on Thursday Night Football at home. Again, good defense and very high pressure rate right now coming in for the Atlanta Falcons. Patriots at 10. Jets against Darnold. In a revenge game for them, I suppose, against the Vikings in London. They're number 10. The Commanders, just because they're playing Deshaun Watson. Texans, Panthers, Raiders, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, Bucks, Colts round up the top 20 defenses of the week. So that will do it for me. All of the rankings will get themselves updated in the description right now. If you're going through this and you're looking for the audio version, it'll be out and released with the Best Bet show as a combo show later on Wednesday evening. But for YouTube, sub to the channel, smash the like, and I'll return with my quick hits Thursday morning as well. Now that I'm back at my home studio and no longer on the road, I have all of the equipment at my disposal to get those quick hits coming back to you, so you can subscribe to that as well on Mayo Media Network. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!